Pleaser podcast. It's Corie, your host. Thank you for being here. I'm on a roll, y'all. I just recorded an episode yesterday, and it's so funny. I really do get in my head like, oh no, I'm going to run out of ideas. I'm not going to have anything to say. I'm, nearing the end of my podcasting career. And then something happens and an idea comes. And that's exactly what happened today. I had a therapy session, and my therapist and I had a really great conversation, and she is really helping me unpack some of my patterns and behaviors, and that's what I want to share with you today. Before we jump in, I just want to extend an invite to you all to join me over on Instagram at peoplepleaser.pod. That's at peoplepleaser, all one word, .pod. Trying to find some intention in that space, and I'd love for you to join me over there. So the conversation I want to have is not necessarily new to this podcast. It actually goes back to one of my first episodes where a friend of mine approached me with the feedback that people pleasing is actually self-pleasing, and that is where I'm going today. Some scenarios have happened as of late where I've shared them with my therapist, and she is really helping me connect to the feelings that are going on in those moments. And she's basically asking me to put the analysis of the behaviors aside and really connect with the feeling, because it's the feelings that those are our drivers. Our feelings drive our behaviors, our actions. It's the underlying emotions that are honestly steering the ship. But because so many of these things are just ingrained, we've developed neural pathways, we're somewhat unconscious to what's going on beneath the surface. It can be really challenging to connect to the feeling, and it can be really easy to focus on the behavior. And so often, I know in my case, we look to change our behaviors. We look to sort of change what's on the surface level, change the clunkiness on the outside, when really so much of the work is on the inside. And I know I'm not like revolutionary in saying this, but for some reason today, the way in which it was offered to me by my therapist, so many light bulbs were going off. So I'm going to draw on two examples, because these are the examples that I examined with my therapist. So they're just top of mind. And I want to see if I can kind of summarize the events in a way that is relevant to this podcast and maybe relevant to you. So the first instance took place this weekend while my husband was coming over from Washington to help me move. Now, I've already shared a little bit about just the anxiety that I had around moving and everything going tickety-boo. I have, anxiety when it comes to like scheduling and things kind of going along a certain course. And I had anticipated all types of things going wrong, and things did go wrong, but they were so unexpected. And I'm not actually going to get into the specific details of that because it's actually not my story to share. It's my husband's, but I want to talk a little bit about my behaviors on the outside. So, as you know, like he's coming from Washington. I live in Victoria, Canada. So we are always navigating border crossing. We're also in the midst of an immigration application. So I am going through the motions to immigrate to the United States. So that in itself is just like chock full of like rules and me being a rule follower. Like I'm always trying to really play by the rules, play everything safe. And there's a lot of fear that comes up because I do get the sense that like we are quite powerless in this system. Not just us, like everyone. Unfortunately, like so much of this process is not in our hands. It's in the hands of the government and the immigration process. So there was an incident that occurred at the border, and it delayed my husband significantly. And it ended up being like quite distressing. And he now has things that he needs to do to address it. And initially, like my reaction was like deep guttural fear. Like there was so much fear around the impacts this would have on my immigration application, the impact it might have on me being able to see my husband. Like it really, I did really go to like a worst case scenario type thinking. And of course, it was just a really stressful incident for my husband to go through. And, you know, he had a lot of anger, he had a lot of frustration. These systems really dehumanize you. They really take away the human experience, and you truly just begin to feel like a number. And, you know, they do not really care about who you are. That's the feeling anyways. And so, being the person that I am, I so quickly go to these rescuer type tendencies. Like I wanted to take my husband's stress away. I wanted to take his frustration away. I wanted to be offering answers and resources and solutions. And this didn't really happen until after the weekend. And I'm actually quite proud of us in that we didn't let it derail our weekend. And we were able to just like enjoy our time together, finish the move, get settled in my new place, yada, yada, yada. But as soon as he went home, we kind of went into, okay, what's next? Like, what are we going to do? And because this has to do with things that I know nothing about, I began like trying to do some research, and I started to try to resource my husband. And I really went into that like action mode of like, okay, how are we going to fix this problem? How are we going to make this problem go away? And how are we going to make it go away as quickly as possible? And the reality is that like the resources I was sending like weren't actually helpful, because it actually my husband knew a lot more about this than I do. And so I was spending all this like, you know, kind of this frantic energy, like looking for things and trying to resource him and trying to fix the problem. And he actually was like, you know what? No, I got this. And, you know, and the scenario kind of kept going on. But where I want to kind of hone in is my efforts to resource him, to take some of his stress away, to make him happy, to make him feel like we have a plan. It was an effort to make my husband's life easier. That is true. However, it was also an effort to manage my own stress. And that is something that I am like brand new to realizing, is that I have always prided myself in um, being helpful, especially in relationships, like doing things for my partner. Like, oftentimes it comes in the kind of like acts of service type love language, like doing things for my partner. Um, and as much as that can actually be helpful, like there is many scenarios where it actually is helpful. Um, there's also this like underlying need of my own that I am trying to meet. And that need is for self-soothing, for minimizing my own stress. And what my therapist is helping me realize is that like when it comes to my own stress, so think the stress of my own life, of my own feelings, I have a very low tolerance. I can handle other people's stress, no problem. I can, spring into action. I can show up. I can actually handle quite a bit in that way. But when it comes to like impeding on my own well-being, if my own life feels stressful, if my own emotions feel unmanageable, I act really, really quickly to try to get rid of the stress. And so in sending these like links and these resources to my husband, yes, that is like in effort to give him some answers, but it's also so that like I can feel like we are managing this big unknown, this big source of stress, so that it can get dealt with as soon as possible, so that I don't have to feel it anymore. I don't have to feel that stress. So I hope that's coming across clearly. I'm definitely still in it. I'm still in that integration phase, but and it can be hard to see like what is my husband's stress and what is my stress and then what is our stress. And in this example, like, it it does impact both of us because we're in a relationship together. So that one's a little muddier. So yeah, I guess the what I really want to pull out from that is these acts of service, this like running to the rescue, this sort of savior complex, um, even just being like a self-proclaimed like caregiver. I'm beginning to really wonder like, okay, what are the underlying emotions that I am trying to tend to? Like, what are the feelings? And so if I take that lens of like, okay, what feelings were at play when I was like trying to find all these resources for my husband and sending him links and trying to find solutions, I was afraid. I was sad. I was worried that this situation was going to impact our connection. I worry that because we are long distance, that one day it might just like not make sense anymore. It might become too hard. It might become too complicated. And I easily turn those feelings into I'm too complicated. It's too hard to be with me. And I really internalize that. And that's all inner voice, like inner narrative. That has never been communicated to me by my husband. And it does come back down to like my core value for connection. Like connection is so vital to me that I am like, it feels like life or death. It feels so important that without it, I can't survive. And so that can put a lot of pressure on situations like this where I feel that maybe our connection will be impacted by this scenario. And so I am like frantically trying to fix the problem, take my stress away, take control, like take over. And that is a fear-based response. And so my therapist's advice isn't to necessarily do anything other than begin to notice. And if I can notice, then to begin unpacking the feelings in those situations. And I know that in my relationship, I have space to say, you know what, I'm just really scared right now. I'm really worried. I'm nervous. I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is confusing. This feels really big. Yeah. And I think just by naming them and bringing them into the room, it actually brings them down to a more manageable level. Just by like bringing them into the room. Because until you bring them into the room, they can be everywhere. They can overtake your whole world. So bring them into the room. Another example that I explored with my therapist today was I'm like having a hard time launching into things. So it was my grandmother's 80th birthday, and my sister and my two cousins, so we were like the granddaughters, we wanted to take my grandma out for pedicures. And my grandma and I live in the same town, but everybody else was like coming from out of town. And so it was my one cousin who initiated the idea. But I then offered to make the reservation because it was happening in my city. I was more familiar with the different salons. And she was like she was like, yes, please, that would be great. So I took on this responsibility of making the booking, and when the day of came, like I felt this sense of like the success of this day is on my shoulders. And I mean, of course, there was like issues with the booking, and there was like these crunchy, bumpy bits to the day. Like it wasn't seamless. It wasn't perfect. And I just like took that as my own, like I was responsible for that. And after the pedicures, we went to a cafe, and again, because I'm like local, people were sort of looking to me as to, like for where to go. And so then there was just this feeling of pressure, like, and not that was from anyone, that was all internalized pressure and expectation that I was putting on myself. But I was just like, oh, now it's on me to like find the right cafe, the best cafe. And, you know, there was a long line, and there was only one person working. And then there were these like grouchy old ladies who yelled at us. And it was just like, I was actually quite stressed the whole day. I didn't actually feel like a participant. I felt that I was like the organizer. And I just felt very like disconnected from the day and like the actual purpose of the day, because I was in this sort of like organizational planning, tending to everyone's needs. And this example, when I walked my therapist through it, I felt like it was a little bit harder for me to grasp, and so I'm gonna maybe have a little bit of a harder time articulating it. But essentially, there was some. She was questioning me on why I offered to make the booking. And there's the logical answer. It's like, oh, I live here locally. I know the different salons. I know that, I have that local knowledge. And what she helped me see is that, sure, that is true. However, does that mean that I was the only one who could have made the booking? Like, could someone from out of town, like my cousin from out of town, could she have done a quick Google search? Yes, of course. But there was something in me that not only wanted to be helpful and make it easy, take some of that off of my cousin, but there's this selfish need where I want to be perceived in a certain way. And it's not like, sure, it's selfish. Like, sure, there's like, and selfish, I think a lot of us have a negative connotation to that word. And my therapist today reframed it as it's like of self, like it's for self, of self. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, we need to be selfish sometimes, but in this sense, like, I was not only kind of in some way wanting to have the, like, be able to look at everybody enjoying their day and feel like I've done a good thing. I facilitated this happy experience, this good day, this good outcome. And there was this other piece that it's like hard for me to admit this because and like, this is so unconscious. Like, this is not something that I am even aware of. And if it wasn't for my counselor today, like, I would not know this. But say my cousin had picked a salon. There is something in me, and it's that need for security. It's that need for like low stress. It's because I have this very low tolerance for stress that there's this like hypothetical scenario where it's like, if she were to pick somewhere else and I was unfamiliar with it, I maybe had a negative association with it, maybe I'd been there before and I didn't like it, or maybe I'd heard a certain thing, I'd be put into this quote unquote, but truly a stressful situation that would then take me out of the experience. And that is what has been such an amazing wake-up call to me, is that it's like, oh my gosh, the lengths I will go on a completely unconscious level to avoid stress. And like, as you can really see in this example, this is very low grade stress. Like the stress of like going to a salon or, getting my nails done somewhere that I'm like, might not be my first pick. Like, I would like to exist in a world where I could manage that I would be okay with that I could just let that roll. And the reality is that like, if I were put in that situation, of course I would let it roll. Like, I'm not someone who's going to like make a big stink, but like there would be this underlying discomfort or stress. And I feel like this is making me sound like such a princess in a way, but it's like truly a unconscious, like, protective shield that I'm putting on myself. And that is why, like, I'm often in situations where I'm taking a leadership role. I'm like kind of taking control of a situation. I'm on the surface, I'm being helpful. I'm being a leader. I'm being proactive. I'm, volunteering to take things on or do more or like do even more than what's asked of me. And so much of it is these wild and elaborate ways of managing my stress and truly believing on some unconscious level that like I cannot handle any amount of stress. And so that's why you see the behaviors, the me offering to make the booking to then, kind of be disconnected from the whole day because I'm like managing, I'm kind of like reaping the consequence of that behavior. It's like, oh, well now, Corie, you've put yourself in this like facilitator role. You've actually given yourself this responsibility. Absolutely no one else is expecting this of you. And I actually want to do a whole entire episode on a part of my identity that is the eldest child in my family, the eldest grandchild, the eldest cousin, and kind of also being raised by my mom, who is the eldest in amongst her siblings. Because I definitely know that some of this is assumed in kind of that like where I stand in my family and within these various roles. I think that's a common experience for like the oldest child, is to take on kind of more of a leadership role, to be the example. So that's something for another day. Yeah. So I'm very, very much just at the beginning of some of this self-awareness. And I think for me, it's going to be really important to, as my therapist suggested, just start to notice and to try and not be too judgmental on myself, and to know that like somewhere along the line, I learned that like stress is bad, stress is scary, stress is dangerous. And I mean, that is what anxiety is, right? Like, and there is definitely always on some level, a need for anxiety. It's your body's like alarm system. It's kind of letting you know when there's danger. Mine is a little out of whack. My alarm bells are going off at the idea of going to the wrong nail salon. Like, come on, there's far bigger things going on in the world. And so again, I'm laughing at myself right now because I mean, that's pretty funny. But also like I don't even know how I got there. I feel very like curious about, wow, like what is that? So curiosity will be very helpful in this, to just sort of begin exploring these patterns of behaviors and what are the needs beneath this? What are the feelings? What are the emotions? And how can I begin to nurture and tend to those emotions, those feelings? And I suspect that by exploring some of those feelings, I will begin to notice or learn about like where they came from, or some of my earlier experiences that may have led to these patterns. Yeah. So I hope this made sense. And yeah, I don't know why this just feels like such an aha moment for me. And this may be an aha moment for you. This may be something that you are already aware of or actively working on. And so I'm very curious to hear where you're at or where this landed. So please hit me up on Instagram and we can chat there. I'm thinking of finding more ways to connect, but I haven't even really given Instagram enough of my attention or love yet. So I'm still going to just hang out on in that space, but perhaps there will be more. So that is everything for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sending this podcast or a specific episode to your friends or family members. Shout us out. And by us, I mean me, because it is just me. And yeah, sending you big hugs, lots of love, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.